Welcome to Life Stories, where we share real tales of resilience, betrayal, and the profound lessons life teaches us. Today's story is one of heartbreak and ultimate triumph. It's about a woman who, after years of devotion, uncovered the shocking truths behind her seemingly perfect marriage. The discovery of betrayal, financial deceit, and manipulation shattered her world. But through courage and determination, she took control of her own destiny. Join us as we unfold the emotional journey of reclaiming power and discovering strength in the face of betrayal. Subscribe to Life Stories to start today's story. I had spent 15 years of my life building what I believed was the perfect life. The American dream personified. My husband, Matt, was a well-respected cardiac surgeon. We had 3 beautiful children, a beautiful house in Oakwood Heights with a white picket fence and a manicured lawn. From the outside, we were the epitome of success, admired by friends and colleagues. For years, I believed we were living a fairy tale. Our marriage seemed unbreakable, built on love, trust, and mutual respect, or so I thought. But it was in the most mundane moments that the cracks began to form. I remember one Tuesday morning. At precisely 9:17 a.m., the twins were at school. Emma was at her piano lesson, and I was sorting through laundry, something that had become a routine part of my day. I had gone to fetch a shirt from Matt's gym bag, thinking it was just another errant piece of clothing to send to the dry cleaners. But there, tucked behind his neatly arranged Oxford shoes, was a discovery I never could have prepared for. The zipper of the bag was half open, and as I reached for the shirt inside, my fingers grazed something that made my blood run cold, a deep crimson stain. It wasn't medical. No surgeon would dare wear a shirt stained in that shade of red into an operating room. My heart skipped a beat, and in that moment, I realized something I couldn't unsee. I froze, staring at the shirt, the implications sinking in slowly, painfully. My mind raced as I pieced together the fragments that had seemed out of place in the past few months. The late nights at the hospital, the sudden increase in golf outings with colleagues, the long hours spent working, even when he had no surgeries scheduled. At that moment, I didn't want to confront him. I didn't want to face the truth. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. I quietly slipped the shirt back into the bag and placed it back exactly where it had been. As though the discovery hadn't happened, I tried to go on with my day, pretending nothing was wrong. But inside, my world was crumbling. The man I had built my life around, the man I had supported through medical school, the man who had promised me a future, had betrayed me in ways I could never have imagined. I knew I had to confront him. I couldn't ignore it. That night, after the children were asleep, I waited for him in our bedroom, the same room where we had made our vows, where we had spent countless nights holding each other through the ups and downs of life. He came in, exhausted, as always, his face drawn from yet another long shift at the hospital. I didn't know how to say it, but I couldn't hold it back any longer. "Are you seeing someone else, Matt?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging in my chest. He didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. He simply nodded and said, "Yes." It was like a punch to the gut. But the real blow came next. "I want a divorce," he said, his voice cold, as though he were discussing something trivial. "I've outgrown this life. I've outgrown us." His words hit me harder than anything else. 15 years of marriage, of love, of shared memories, reduced to this one stark, brutal sentence. Outgrown us. What did that even mean? We had built this life together. From the ground up. The late-night study sessions, the sacrifices, the challenges, none of it had meant anything to him. "I gave everything for this life," I whispered, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Everything I am, everything I had, I gave it all for you. For us." He laughed bitterly, his eyes cold and distant. "You did what? Bake cookies for school fundraisers? Organize my sock drawer? I save lives every day. Caroline, what do you do?" His words were like knives, each one digging deeper. I had put my own career on hold to support him, to manage our home and raise our children. I had dedicated myself to his success. And now, in an instant, He was dismissing it all. "I've built this life. Despite the anchor of domesticity," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "And now, I'm done." I stood there, frozen, as the reality of his words hit me like a wave. He was leaving. There was no pleading with him. There was no hope left. Our marriage, our life, had been a mirage, and in that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, he left before dawn. On the kitchen counter, I found a business card for his lawyer. The perfect life I had worked so hard to build was nothing but an illusion. The cracks had always been there, but I had been too focused on maintaining the facade to see them. Now, the illusion had shattered, and I was left to pick up the pieces. The days that followed Matt's demand for divorce were some of the hardest of my life. I was emotionally numb, yet a part of me was already preparing for the battle that lay ahead. As I moved forward with the divorce proceedings, I couldn't ignore the growing sense that something far deeper, far darker was at play. Matt had always been careful, but I knew now that the man I had married, the man I thought I knew, was capable of deceit on a scale I couldn't even begin to fathom. One afternoon, after tucking the kids into bed, I decided to take a more methodical approach. I called Patricia Winters, a divorce attorney I had heard about through a friend. Patricia was known for being ruthless, and I needed someone who would fight for me. Someone who would not let Matt's charm and connections influence the outcome. I made an appointment with her for the very next day. Patricia's first piece of advice was clear. Document everything, especially the finances. Her tone was calm, but there was a sharpness to it that made me realize the depth of the fight I was about to engage in. That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I opened the safe we kept in our home office. For years, Matt had been the one to handle the finances, managing everything from tax returns to property deeds. But as I rifled through the paperwork, my fingers trembled. There, buried among the records, I found something that stopped me cold. There were monthly withdrawals, $5 here, $7.500 there, sometimes as much as $10, transferred from our joint savings account to a company called Riverstone Holdings. No explanation, no paper trail, no receipts. I had never heard of Riverstone Holdings. But the numbers didn't lie. Over the past 2 years, nearly $250 had disappeared into this mysterious entity. I contacted the bank the next morning, and the account manager confirmed my worst fears. Riverstone Holdings was a limited liability company, registered solely in Matt's name. The money trail ended there. I felt sick. The betrayal was no longer just about infidelity, it was about something far worse. This was a calculated attempt to hide assets, to deceive me on a financial level, and I was just beginning to scratch the surface. When I met with Patricia again, I slid the bank statements across her mahogany desk. Her sharp eyes scanned the documents, and she nodded as though she had seen this kind of thing before. "Unfortunately, this is normal in divorces," she said, "but what we have here suggests something more. Something long-term." She didn't need to elaborate. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The cracks that had once been invisible in our marriage were now wide open, and I was staring down into a void. But Patricia wasn't done yet. "There's someone else you need to speak with," she said. "Dr. Nathan Brooks. He used to work with Matt." Dr. Brooks had been a quiet, reserved man, someone I hadn't thought much about. He had left Ashford Medical Center 3 years ago under what Matt had always referred to as interesting circumstances. But the way Patricia said it made me realize that there was more to the story. I tracked Dr. Brooks down through several calls, eventually finding him working at a modest family clinic about 40 miles outside the city. When we met, I could see that time had not been kind to him. His face was lined with age and stress, his hair tinged with gray. But when he spoke, his voice was calm, even if it carried an undercurrent of something more. "I've been expecting your call for years," he said quietly, his eyes meeting mine with a look of sympathy. "I just didn't know who would break first, Matt or his arrogance." What Dr. Brooks revealed that day shattered what little remained of my world. The fertility clinic Matt and I had used for our IVF treatments was in trouble. Dr. Brooks had discovered discrepancies in the lab reports, slight alterations, manipulations of results to maintain the clinic's reputation. But when he confronted the director, Dr. Mercer, he learned something much more disturbing. Matt had been complicit in the tampering. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. Our children, the ones I had carried for 9 months each, the ones we had conceived through IVF, were not biologically his. Matt had ensured that his sperm was never used in the process. Instead, anonymous donors had been used. And he had known all along. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to shatter something, to do anything to rid myself of the overwhelming sense of betrayal that flooded my chest. But I couldn't. I had to think. I had to be methodical. I left the meeting with Dr. Brooks feeling numb, my mind racing with questions I could never have answered. How could Matt have done this? Why? It wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about a fundamental betrayal. One that had been in place long before I ever knew it. The man I had loved, the man I had built my life around, had not only been lying to me about his affair, he had been lying about our entire family, about everything we thought we had. As the days blurred into one another, I felt like I was living in a haze. My mind was overwhelmed with the discoveries I had made. The lies, the deceit, the betrayal, it all felt like a dream that I couldn't wake up from. But one thing was clear. I couldn't let Matt get away with it. I had to expose him for what he truly was. Not just for the sake of my dignity but for the sake of our children and their future. I started to piece together the fragments of the evidence I had gathered. And as I did, something inside me shifted. The grief I had once felt began to crystallize into something sharper. Something more focused. My anger, my hurt, it was no longer a cloud that clouded my judgment. It was a weapon, and I was ready to wield it. I hired a private investigator. Someone who could dig deeper. Someone who could find the pieces I hadn't yet uncovered. He tracked down a name that sent a chill down my spine. Julia Harrington. I hadn't thought much about her, other than the fact that she was Matt's mistress. But as I learned more, I discovered that she wasn't just his lover. She had a history with Matt, a history that went much further back. Julia's mother, Melline Harrington, had been one of Matt's patients. She had died during a routine valve replacement surgery, a death that Matt had claimed was caused by complications with medication. But as the private investigator dug deeper, we learned that the real story was much darker. Matt had been operating on minimal sleep after spending the weekend with Julia in Chicago. And it was that exhaustion that had led to the mistake. Matt had covered it up, falsifying the records and ensuring that nothing would tarnish his reputation. When I first found out, I was numb. I couldn't comprehend the full extent of what I was hearing. My world had already been shattered. But this was something else. The woman who had been Matt's lover was also the daughter of the woman he had killed. The twisted, cruel irony of it all was almost too much to bear. But I wasn't done yet. The private investigator gave me another piece of the puzzle. He found a list of patients who had been affected by Matt's negligence, families whose lives had been altered, whose futures had been stolen. Some of them were still unaware of the truth. The families whose children Matt had fathered. The families who had been lied to about their own children's genetic makeup. And that was when I knew that the truth needed to be exposed. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all the lives Matt had ruined with his arrogance and his lies. With everything I had gathered, financial records, testimonies, and the damning evidence from the fertility clinic, I reached out to the hospital board. They needed to know what kind of man Matt truly was. It wasn't just about his affair or his embezzlement of money. It was about the lives he had manipulated, the lives he had destroyed in his pursuit of power and success. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The annual Ashford Medical Center Gala was approaching, and Matt was set to receive the prestigious Physician of the Year award. It was the perfect opportunity to bring everything crashing down. I didn't want to do it in a petty, vindictive way. I didn't want to ruin him just for the sake of revenge. I wanted him to face the consequences of his actions. And I knew that the truth would hurt him more than anything else. The night of the gala arrived. And I put on the black dress Matt had always said made me look like I was trying too hard. It wasn't about impressing anyone anymore. It wasn't about keeping up appearances. It was about me, reclaiming the power he had stolen from me for years. As I entered the ballroom alone, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The room was filled with the elite of the medical world. But I didn't care. Matt was standing at the front, arm around Julia, his smug smile betraying no hint of what was about to come. I was ready. For the first time in months. I was ready. I had already met with the hospital board and had arranged for them to see the evidence. Agent Dawson, the investigator who had been building the case against Matt, was positioned outside, waiting for the signal. The storm that had been threatening all evening seemed to mirror the chaos that was about to unfold. I mingled through the crowd, accepting condolences for my failing marriage, smiling politely as I made my way toward the table where Matt and Julia were sitting. When Matt saw me, his expression shifted from surprise to smug satisfaction. He thought I was here to beg him to reconsider. He thought I had come to make one last desperate plea. But I didn't. I walked toward their table, calm and composed, and said, "Congratulations on your freedom." Matt's smug grin faltered, replaced by a confused frown. Julia's face drained of color as she realized what was about to happen. "Do you know who she is?" I asked, turning to Julia. "Do you know who you're sitting next to?" Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. I slid an envelope across the table. "I think you'll find this interesting," I said quietly, watching as Matt's hand trembled when he opened the envelope. The DNA test results were in. The results that would change everything. I watched as Matt's expression transformed. Confusion, disbelief, then horror. He stared at the papers in front of him, his mouth working as if he couldn't find the words. "This is impossible," he whispered. But I knew it wasn't. It was the truth that would destroy him. The truth that would finally expose him for the fraud he was. As Matt sat frozen in shock, staring at the DNA test results, the weight of the truth began to sink in. His facade of control, of perfection, crumbled before my eyes. For so many years, he had controlled the narrative, presented himself as the selfless, dedicated surgeon, the perfect father, the loving husband. But here, in this quiet, intimate moment, the truth was laid bare for all to see: his lies, his deceit, and his complete disregard for the lives he had destroyed. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. I could feel the tension, the disbelief, radiating from Matt as he struggled to maintain his composure. But it was too late. The truth had already been spoken. And there was no turning back. The authorities were already outside, waiting for the signal. Matt had built his empire on lies. But it was all coming crashing down in front of everyone he had worked so hard to impress. As the police led him away in handcuffs, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't just a part of his story. I was reclaiming mine. The power he had held over me for so long had dissipated. And now I was free. Free from the lies. Free from the facade. Free from the man who had stolen so much from me. In the weeks that followed, Matt faced multiple felony charges. His career destroyed. His life unraveled. But for me, it was the beginning of something new. I had lost a husband. But I had regained my sense of self. And as I moved forward, I knew one thing for certain. I would never let anyone dictate my worth again. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more tales of strength, resilience, and life lessons.